You walk into the room and you can feel it. The way the conversation doesn't quite include you. The way someone repeats the point you already made, and suddenly it lands, because now it's coming from them. You've been in this meeting before, this family gathering, this negotiation. You know the shape of it. Someone has already decided what you're capable of, and they decided it before you said a word. Maybe it's a boss who explains things to you that you taught yourself years ago. Maybe it's a sibling who still talks to you like you're 14. Maybe it's a competitor who never bothered to study your work because they assumed there was nothing there worth studying. And the instinct, the immediate, burning instinct, is to correct them, to prove it, to perform your competence loudly enough that the underestimation collapses on contact. So you do. You over-explain. You raise your voice half a register. You bring receipts to conversations that didn't ask for evidence. And somehow, the harder you push to be taken seriously, the less seriously you're taken. Here's the reframe. Being underestimated isn't a wound. It isn't proof that you're invisible or unworthy. It's a resource. It's one of the only advantages in human conflict that costs you nothing and costs your opponent everything, if you know how to use it instead of resenting it. This is not a personal failing, it's a strategic position. And strategic positions can be played. 25 centuries ago, a general named Sun Tzu wrote a text that has outlived every empire that tried to use it. He didn't write about brute strength. He wrote about clarity, about winning contests before the first visible move was ever made. His core insight was simple and brutal. The fighter who is misjudged by his enemy already holds a hidden weapon. Sun Tzu taught that all warfare is based on deception, not cruelty, not dishonesty, but the withholding of your true capability until the moment it matters most. He never said announce your strength. He said something closer to the opposite. And that idea, quiet, patient, almost invisible, is what we're building this entire video around. In the next few minutes, you're going to walk through 6 strategic laws, Sun Tzu's laws, translated out of the battlefield and into your career, your relationships, your own mind, that show you exactly how to use being underestimated instead of fighting it. You'll learn why proving people wrong immediately is almost always the losing move. You'll learn what to actually do with the energy you're currently spending on being offended. And by the end, you'll understand the specific moment, the turning point every underestimated person eventually faces, where this entire strategy either pays off completely or collapses because of one impulsive reaction. Stay until the end. The final law is the one that decides whether everything before it was wasted. Chapter 1, the first law. Let them write you off there is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from being perpetually misjudged. It's not the exhaustion of hard work. It's the exhaustion of hard work that nobody credits to you. And so a pattern forms. You start narrating your own competence out loud. You mention the degree. You mention the years of experience. You mention the win, unprompted, in a conversation that wasn't about winning. Not because you're arrogant, because you're tired of being unseen and you think the fix is volume. This is the first losing pattern, and it's the most human one. The need to correct the misperception immediately, on their timeline, using their terms. Sun Tzu's strategy runs against this instinct entirely. He taught that when you are capable, you should appear incapable. When you are near, appear far. Not as a permanent state, as a tactical one. The general who reveals his full strength the moment he has it has given his enemy the single most valuable piece of information in any conflict, what they're actually dealing with. Think about what happens the instant someone fully understands your capability. They recalibrate, they prepare, they stop underestimating you, and in doing so, they stop making the mistakes that underestimation produces. An opponent who respects you is a careful opponent. A careful opponent is a harder opponent. An opponent who dismisses you is careless. They talk more than they should around you. They don't prepare seriously for your response. They leave openings. Because why would you need to be guarded against something they've already decided is not a threat? This is not about theatrical humility. It's not about pretending to be less than you are for the rest of your life. It's about recognizing that the moment you feel the itch to prove yourself, that itch is not information about your worth. It's information about your impatience. Picture a version of you 6 months from now, having quietly built the thing you're currently trying to verbally convince people you're capable of building. Which version has more leverage? The one who announced the plan in a meeting and then had to defend it against every objection in the room, or the one who simply built it and let the finished results speak in a language nobody can argue with? The people who eventually earn the most respect are rarely the loudest in the room when the misjudging happens. They're the ones who let the misjudging happen, took the resulting freedom of being unwatched, and used it. Being dismissed removes surveillance. Nobody scrutinizes the moves of someone they've already decided doesn't matter. That is not an insult. That is cover. And cover, used correctly, is one of the most valuable positions you can occupy in any competitive environment. A job, a negotiation, a family dynamic, a rivalry that hasn't even announced itself as a rivalry yet. There's a version of this that shows up in negotiation too, far from any battlefield. Sit across from someone who has already decided you'll fold quickly, and you'll notice they negotiate carelessly. They anchor low. They assume they don't need their strongest arguments, because they've already priced you as a soft opponent. Every one of those careless moves is information you now have and they don't know they gave you. The negotiator who corrects that impression in the first 5 minutes trades a lifetime of useful carelessness on the other side for 30 seconds of feeling respected. This is uncomfortable to sit with, because being underestimated genuinely hurts. It's not a purely tactical experience. It can feel like being erased, especially if it echoes older wounds. A childhood where you were the quiet one. A family that decided early who the capable sibling was and never revisited the verdict. The strategy in this video doesn't ask you to pretend that doesn't sting. It asks you to notice the sting, let it inform you rather than command you, and then make a choice about timing that the sting alone would never make for you. Consider what it actually costs to correct a misjudgment in real time, in the room, on the spot. It costs you the element of surprise you were never trying to build but received anyway. It costs you the accurate read you were getting on how this person operates when they think no one capable is watching. And it often costs you credibility, ironically, because a person defending their competence out loud rarely sounds as convincing as a person who simply doesn't need to. None of this means staying underestimated forever is the goal. The goal is choosing when the correction happens and making sure that when it does happen, it happens on terrain you've already prepared. Not terrain someone else selected for you in the heat of a single provocative sentence. The first law, then, is not passivity. It's patience with a purpose. Let the underestimation stand, because contesting it early costs you the exact advantage it was quietly handing you. Chapter 2, the second law, the weight of an unspent reaction. Theirs as a specific kind of provocation designed to do one thing: pull a reaction out of you fast enough that you don't get to choose it. The dismissive comment in the meeting, the passive jab from a colleague, the sibling who knows exactly which sentence will make you defend yourself in front of everyone. Every time you take that bait, you spend something. Not just time, attention, composure, the story other people tell about how reactive you are. And the maddening part is that the person who provoked you didn't even have to be right. They just had to be fast. Sun Tzu built an entire philosophy around one deceptively simple idea: the skillful strategist conserves his forces and lets the enemy exhaust theirs. Not every attack deserves a counterattack. Not every provocation deserves your energy. The general who chases every skirmish arrives at the real battle already depleted. Consider Daniel, a composite of a dozen people who've told versions of this same story. Daniel worked under a manager who routinely questioned his competence in front of the team, small jabs disguised as jokes. For months, Daniel answered every one. He corrected the record every time, in the room, immediately, and every time he came across a little more defensive, a little more rattled, which, ironically, made the jabs land harder, because now they visibly worked. Then Daniel changed one thing. He stopped answering in the room. He let the comments sit, unchallenged, in real time, and instead, he channeled every ounce of that reactive energy into the actual work, quietly, after hours, with no audience. 3 months later, he presented results that made the pattern of jabs look exactly like what it was. Noise from someone who had nothing else to offer. He never once raised his voice. He didn't need to. The silence in the room when his results were presented did the correcting for him. This is the second law. Provocation is a withdrawal request on your composure, and you are allowed to decline it. Modern psychology backs this same instinct up, even without referencing any general from antiquity. Research on emotional regulation consistently shows that the pause between stimulus and response, even a few seconds, dramatically changes decision quality under pressure. People who react instantly to provocation make measurably worse strategic choices than people who create even a small gap before responding. The gap isn't weakness. The gap is where your actual judgment lives. Here's the part almost nobody tells you. Restraint doesn't feel powerful while you're doing it. It feels like losing. It feels like letting them get away with it. Every cell in your body will tell you that silence is surrender. It isn't. Silence, deployed on purpose, is a withheld verdict. You are not required to render judgment on every provocation the moment it's offered to you. You get to choose the terrain and the timing on which you respond, if you respond at all. Ask yourself, the next time the jab lands, does this deserve my energy today? Or is this someone trying to borrow my composure because they've run out of their own? Most provocations are not attacks. They are requests. And you don't have to fulfill every request made of you. There's a physical dimension to this that's easy to underestimate, no pun intended. Every reactive exchange you have leaves a residue. It shows up as tension you carry into the next meeting, as replaying the conversation at midnight instead of sleeping, as a low hum of irritation that colors decisions that have nothing to do with the original provocation. You don't just spend energy in the moment of reacting. You spend it for hours afterward, sometimes days, reliving an exchange that the other person likely forgot within the hour. This is part of what makes conserving your reactions so difficult in practice. The payoff is invisible and delayed, while the cost of restraint is immediate and loud. Silence, in the moment, feels like nothing is happening. Reaction feels like something is happening. Momentum, movement, a sense of control being reclaimed. But that feeling is frequently a trap. Sun Tzu warned repeatedly against the general who moves simply because moving feels better than waiting. Movement without advantage is not strategy, it's just motion. Think about the shape of a typical provocation. It's rarely actually about you. Daniel's manager, needling him in front of the team, was very likely managing his own insecurity about being challenged by someone more capable than him, a common enough pattern that anyone who has spent time in competitive workplaces will recognize it instantly. Provocations frequently originate from the provoker's own depletion, their own need to feel bigger by making someone else feel smaller in front of an audience. Recognizing this doesn't excuse the behavior, but it does help you correctly categorize the event. This is rarely a real threat to your standing. It's usually a request for your energy, dressed up as a challenge to your competence. There's also a distinction worth making between suppression and conservation, because they look similar from the outside and feel completely different from the inside. Suppression is swallowing a reaction and letting it curdle, unprocessed, until it leaks out sideways in some unrelated moment, usually at the worst possible time. Conservation is fully feeling the provocation, acknowledging it honestly to yourself, and then making a deliberate decision not to spend it on this particular exchange because you've identified something better to spend it on. One of these builds resentment. The other builds reserves. A useful practice, borrowed loosely from negotiation training before responding to any provocation. Silently ask what outcome you actually want from this exchange. Not what would feel satisfying in the next 10 seconds, what you actually want 6 months from now. Almost every provocation, examined this way, reveals that the reactive response and the desired outcome point in completely different directions. This distinction matters most in exactly the moments it's hardest to remember, which is precisely why it's worth rehearsing when nothing is at stake. Athletes rehearse composure under pressure long before the pressure arrives, running through high-stress scenarios in low-stress conditions so the response is already built by the time it's needed. You can do the same thing here. Picture the provocation you're most likely to face again, the specific comment, the specific person, the specific tone, and mentally walk through, choosing not to react, before you're actually standing in that room with your face getting warm. The rehearsal doesn't remove the difficulty. It just means you're not building the skill from zero in the exact moment you can least afford to. The strategist who wins the long game is rarely the one who wins every single exchange. It's the one who has energy left when it actually counts, because they didn't spend it correcting people who were never going to be convinced anyway. Chapter 3, the third law. Read the terrain. Not the story. There is a difference between your situation and the story you're telling yourself about your situation, and almost nobody pauses long enough to notice the gap. You've done it. Everyone has. A friend goes quiet for 2 days, and your mind writes an entire narrative. They're upset with you. You did something wrong. The friendship is fracturing, before you've confirmed a single fact. A deal stalls, and your mind decides the whole relationship is collapsing. Someone underestimates you once, and your mind decides this is the story of your entire career. Sun Tzu placed enormous weight on something he called knowledge of terrain. Understanding the actual ground you're standing on, its real features, not the ground you imagine or fear. He said the general who knows the terrain and knows himself will not be in danger in 100 battles. Not because the terrain is friendly, because it's known. Most conflict, professional, personal, internal, is lost not because the terrain was hostile, but because it was misread. You assumed a person's silence meant hostility when it meant exhaustion. You assumed an opportunity was closed when it was simply slow. You assumed you were behind when you were actually early. This is where the underestimation pattern gets dangerous. Not because of what other people think of you, but because of what you start to believe about yourself in response. Being dismissed repeatedly can quietly convince you that the dismissal is accurate. That's not reading the terrain. That's importing someone else's flawed map and calling it reality. The discipline here is almost forensic. Separate the fact from the interpretation. Fact: a person spoke over you in a meeting. Interpretation: they think you're incompetent and everyone agrees. The fact is small and specific. The interpretation is enormous and mostly invented, built from old wounds that have nothing to do with the room you're currently standing in. Cross-validated by behavioral science, this pattern has a name close to what researchers call cognitive reappraisal, the practice of deliberately re-examining an automatic interpretation of an event before accepting it as truth. People who practice this consistently report lower reactive stress and make sharper decisions, because they're responding to what actually happened instead of the worst-case story their nervous system generated in half a second. Reading terrain accurately also means being honest about your own position, without inflating or shrinking it. If you're early in a skill, say so, to yourself at least. If you're actually further along than the room is giving you credit for, know that too, quietly. And let the discrepancy work in your favor rather than becoming a grievance you carry into every interaction. The strategist who reads terrain clearly makes fewer wasted moves. They don't fight battles that were never actually being fought. They don't defend against attacks that were never actually launched. And most importantly, they don't mistake a temporary underestimation for a permanent verdict, because they're looking at the actual ground, not the fear-shaped map they built the night they couldn't sleep. There's a particular trap that catches people who have been underestimated for a long time, and it deserves naming directly: hypervigilance disguised as perception. When you've been dismissed enough times, your mind gets efficient at spotting dismissal, sometimes so efficient that it starts finding it in places it doesn't actually exist. A neutral comment gets read as condescension. A busy colleague's short reply gets read as a snub. This isn't weakness or paranoia in any clinical sense. It's a pattern-matching system doing exactly what it was trained to do. A little too well, a little too often. The correction isn't to stop noticing patterns. Noticing patterns is exactly what kept you alert enough to develop this whole strategy in the first place. The correction is to add one extra step before accepting the pattern as confirmed. What is the simplest, most boring explanation for what just happened? Boring explanations are underrated. The colleague who didn't reply might be in back-to-back meetings. The friend who went quiet might be dealing with something that has nothing to do with you. Reserve the dramatic interpretation for when the evidence actually earns it. Sun Tzu's writing on terrain goes further than physical geography. He also emphasized understanding the disposition of your opponent, their habits, their patterns, their actual tendencies, rather than their reputation. This applies directly here. The colleague who dismissed you in one meeting has an actual pattern of behavior across many interactions, not just the one that stung. Look at the full pattern before deciding what a single data point means. Sometimes the person who underestimated you today has underestimated everyone, always. And it has nothing to do with you specifically. Sometimes it's the opposite. This is a rare exception in an otherwise respectful relationship, and inflating it into a verdict does more damage to the relationship than the original comment ever did. Reading terrain accurately also requires something harder than observation: honesty about the terrain you've created yourself. If you've spent months avoiding a difficult conversation, the resulting tension in the room isn't a mystery to be diagnosed. It's a direct consequence of an avoided decision, and no amount of strategic reframing changes that fact. Sun Tzu's strategists were not permitted to blame the weather for outcomes that were actually the result of poor preparation. Neither are you. It's worth pausing on why this particular distortion is so common among people who've spent a long time feeling underestimated. When your competence has been repeatedly dismissed, your nervous system starts treating dismissal as the default expectation, rather than an occasional event. This isn't a character flaw, it's a learned prediction, built from real experience. Doing its job a little too eagerly. The fix isn't willpower, it's building a habit of checking predictions against present evidence before letting the prediction run the show uncontested. The same way a careful strategist checks a scouting report against the actual terrain, instead of assuming yesterday's map is still accurate today. There's a quiet confidence that comes from this kind of clear-eyed terrain reading, separate entirely from how any single room responds to you on any single day. You stop being at the mercy of every fluctuating signal, a cold reply, a skipped invitation, a joke that landed wrong, because you've built the habit of checking the story against the facts before letting the story run your emotional state for the rest of the day. Before you respond to anything, a slight, a silence, a closed door, ask one question first. Is this the terrain, or is this the story? The answer changes everything about what happens next. Chapter 4, the fourth law. The mask of formlessness water takes the shape of whatever contains it. It has no fixed form of its own, and that is precisely why nothing can trap it. Sun Tzu returned to this image again and again. The strategist who has no fixed, predictable form cannot be prepared against. The general who reveals his exact shape hands his opponent a map of exactly how to defeat him. This is not a lesson in dishonesty. It's a lesson in not narrating your interior life to people who haven't earned access to it, and, more subtly, in not locking yourself into a fixed identity that other people can then use against you. Here's where this gets personal. Most people, especially people who feel underestimated, do the opposite of formlessness. They over-disclose. They explain their plans in detail before the plans are real. They tell the room exactly how the criticism landed, exactly how much it hurt, exactly what they intend to do to prove everyone wrong. Every one of those disclosures is a piece of intelligence handed, for free, to people who may not have your interests at heart. Consider Priya, another composite, built from a familiar shape of story. Priya ran a small design studio and had a client who consistently second-guessed her decisions, openly, in front of other collaborators. Early on, Priya explained herself every time, walked through her reasoning point by point, hoping thorough explanation would earn respect. It didn't. It taught the client that pushback got them a full download of Priya's thinking, which they then picked apart piece by piece. Priya changed her approach without changing her competence at all. She stopped narrating her reasoning in real time. She delivered decisions cleanly without the accompanying justification tool. When asked why, she'd give one sentence, not 5 paragraphs. The client, no longer able to find a thread to pull on, stopped pulling. Not because Priya became cold, because she stopped handing over the rope. Formlessness doesn't mean secrecy for its own sake, and it doesn't mean lying. It means recognizing that your emotional reactions, your half-formed plans, your private doubts are not public property just because someone asked a probing question in a tone that implied they were owed an answer. You are allowed to be undecided out loud without disclosing everything undecided about you. There's a second layer here, quieter and more important, formlessness toward yourself. Don't lock your own identity into the person who was underestimated as a permanent role you now perform. That identity, however true it once was, is itself a fixed shape, and fixed shapes can be used against you, including by your own mind, on the days you need flexibility most. The strategist holds their form loosely. They let a room misjudge their capability, their mood, their next move, not because they're being manipulative, but because they understand that clarity handed out too early is clarity handed to whoever is standing closest, whether or not that person deserves it. There's a version of formlessness that applies specifically to plans, and it might be the most practically useful application of this entire law. Announcing a plan before it's built invites 2 kinds of damage. First, it invites opinions from people who haven't done the work and won't do the work, but will happily tell you why it won't succeed, opinions that cost you nothing to receive and everything to metabolize, because doubt is contagious, even when it's baseless. Second, and more strategically important, it removes the option to adjust the plan privately when it needs adjusting, because now you have an audience expecting the version you announced, and changing course starts to feel like failure instead of what it actually is, normal iteration. Sun Tzu's forces moved with what he called formlessness, precisely so opponents couldn't prepare countermeasures against a shape they couldn't see. Translate that into ordinary terms. The plan you haven't announced can still be quietly abandoned, revised, or completely rebuilt without anyone clocking it as a retreat. The plan you've already announced to the room is now a public commitment, and public commitments are far more expensive to walk back than private ones, even when walking back is clearly the smarter move. This law also has a healthy limit worth naming directly, because taken too far it curdles into something else entirely. Isolation, formlessness toward people who haven't earned trust is strategic. Formlessness toward every single person in your life, including partners, close friends, mentors who've proven themselves trustworthy, becomes a different problem. Loneliness dressed up as discipline. The skill being described here is discernment, not a blanket policy of secrecy. Sun Tzu had generals he trusted completely with his actual battle plans. The formlessness was reserved specifically for the enemy and for anyone whose loyalty hadn't yet been demonstrated. There's also a quieter, internal version of this law that's easy to miss. Formlessness toward yourself means resisting the urge to lock in a fixed self-narrative before the evidence is complete. I'm someone who always gets overlooked. I'm someone who never gets the credit. I'm someone who has to fight twice as hard for half the recognition. These narratives often start as accurate observations about a specific season of life. The danger is in treating them as permanent identity rather than a temporary reading of temporary terrain. A fixed self-story, once adopted, starts filtering evidence to confirm itself. The same way a fixed opponent becomes predictable and exploitable. Stay formless about who you are becoming, even while staying clear-eyed about who has underestimated you so far. Ask yourself, before your next instinct to explain yourself fully, does this person need this information to move forward productively with me? Or do I simply want the discomfort of being misunderstood to end faster? Those are different needs. Only one of them is actually strategic. Chapter 5, the fifth law. The moment they underestimate you completely, there comes a moment. And if you've been underestimated for long enough, you will recognize it the instant it arrives, where the underestimation reaches its absolute peak. It's the moment someone is so certain you're no threat that they stop being careful around you entirely. This is the highest leverage moment in the entire strategy, and it is also the moment where almost everyone breaks. Because here is what that peak moment actually feels like from the inside. It doesn't feel like opportunity. It feels like humiliation. It's the meeting where they announce the decision without consulting you, assuming you wouldn't have anything useful to add. It's the family gathering where they joke about your plans in front of everyone, certain enough of your failure that they don't even bother to soften it. It's the competitor who publicly, casually dismisses your work as irrelevant, not even bothering to study it first. Because studying it would imply it was worth studying. Every instinct you have will scream at you to end the underestimation right there, in that room, in that moment, to unleash everything you've been holding back, all at once, as proof. This is the single highest stakes decision in the entire pattern, because this is exactly where discipline is hardest, and exactly where it matters most. Sun Tzu's clearest teaching on this exact moment is uncomfortable. Because it goes against every emotional impulse you have, the supreme strategist wins without a visible battle. Not because the confrontation isn't deserved, because the confrontation taken in that emotional moment is rarely the one that actually secures the win. Think about what an explosive, vindicating reaction in that peak moment actually accomplishes. For a few seconds, it feels like justice, and then the room recalibrates around a new story. Not I was wrong about them, but I knew they were unstable. I knew there was something off. This confirms it. You've handed them a new, worse narrative, built entirely out of your own reaction. At the exact moment you had the most leverage to say nothing. This is the turning point, and it deserves to be named precisely. The moment of maximum underestimation is not the moment to break your silence. It is the moment to let your preparation, already built quietly across every earlier law in this video, speak for you without your voice being the thing that delivers it. What does that actually look like, practically, in the room? It looks like taking the dismissal without performing your hurt. It looks like letting the joke land, unchallenged, in real time, and finishing what you were already building instead of pivoting to defend yourself. It looks like watching the decision get made without you, and quietly ensuring your next move makes your presence in the next decision unavoidable, not through announcement, but through result. This is the hardest chapter in the entire strategy because it asks you to do the single most counterintuitive thing a human under pressure can do: absorb the peak of the underestimation without discharging it immediately. Not forever, not as a permanent posture, just long enough to choose your moment instead of letting the moment choose you. Every earlier law in this video, the patience, the conserved energy, the accurate reading of terrain, the formlessness, exists to prepare you for exactly this single point. If you break here, reacting loudly, explaining everything at once, trying to win the room's opinion back through volume, you spend everything you've saved in one uncontrolled moment, and you spend it on an audience that, in most cases, was never going to be convinced by volume in the first place. If you hold here, not indefinitely, just through this one moment, you keep the single most valuable asset in the entire strategy intact, the element of a result nobody saw coming, delivered on your timing, in your language, with your evidence. It helps to have a concrete picture of what holding actually looks like from the inside, because stay composed is easy to say and nearly impossible to execute without a specific method. In the peak moment, the body reacts before the mind has a chance to weigh in, heat in the chest, a tightening in the jaw, the urge to speak immediately filling the silence before it becomes uncomfortable. The discipline isn't pretending that surge doesn't happen. It's building, in advance, a single physical anchor you return to the instant you notice it. One slow breath before a single word leaves your mouth. That's the entire technique. It's not mystical. It's just enough of a delay to let judgment catch up to impulse, which, as it turns out, is most of what strategic composure actually is in practice. Consider a composite figure named Marcus, a mid-level engineer whose team lead announced a major project reassignment in an all-hands meeting without consulting him, casually mentioning that we need someone more senior-minded to own this, in front of the entire department. This was the peak moment. Every version of Marcus that had spent years being quietly overlooked wanted to stand up right there and list in detail the 6 months of unrecognized work that made the comment absurd. He didn't. He said understood, took the breath, and let the meeting move on. Nothing about that response felt like a win in the moment. It felt like the worst kind of loss, public, witnessed, uncorrected. Over the following weeks, Marcus didn't campaign for reconsideration. He didn't lobby colleagues to advocate on his behalf. He finished the 2 projects already on his plate with unusual precision, documented the outcomes clearly, and let them exist in the record without commentary. 6 weeks later, the reassigned project stalled under its new, more senior-minded owner for reasons that had nothing to do with seniority and everything to do with unfamiliarity with the existing codebase. Leadership came back to Marcus directly, not because he'd made a case, but because the terrain had shifted in a way that made the earlier decision look exactly as uninformed as it had actually been. Marcus never once mentioned the original comment. He didn't need to. The room had already updated its own map. Months later, a newer colleague asked him, almost in passing, how he'd stayed so calm that day in the all-hands meeting. Marcus thought about it for a second and said only that the calm wasn't really about that meeting. It was about trusting that the actual work would eventually say more than he could have said for himself in the moment. It wasn't a performance of wisdom. It was just, by then, simply true. This is what the highest stakes application of the strategy actually produces. Not a satisfying confrontation, but a quiet correction that the room arrives at on its own, which is far more durable than any correction you could have argued them into. An opinion you're argued out of can be argued back into. An opinion the room revises on its own, based on its own observation, tends to stay revised. This pattern shows up consistently enough in workplace and negotiation research that it has a recognizable shape even outside any strategic text. People place far more weight on conclusions they arrive at independently than on conclusions handed to them, even when the underlying evidence is identical either way. A room told directly that it misjudged someone tends to get defensive about the accusation itself. A room that quietly notices the misjudgment on its own, through observed results, has no ego stake to defend, it simply updates. This is precisely why the peak moment rewards silence so disproportionately. Silence, at that exact point, isn't the absence of a strategy. It's the mechanism by which the correction becomes theirs instead of yours to argue for. None of this means the peak moment doesn't cost anything. It costs exactly what it feels like it costs in real time, the discomfort of being visibly misjudged and choosing not to fix that discomfort immediately. That cost is real, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. The strategic case being made here isn't that the cost disappears. It's that the cost is smaller and shorter-lived than the cost of reacting in a way that hands your critics a new and truer sounding story about you. This is the hinge the entire video turns on. Everything after this point is what becomes possible, because you didn't break at the peak. Chapter 6. The sixth law. Quiet command after the peak moment passes. And it does pass. Every peak does. Something changes that's difficult to describe until you've lived through it. The compulsive need to correct every misjudgment starts to quiet down. Not because you've given up on being understood, because you've stopped needing to be understood on anyone else's schedule. Sun Tzu described the ideal general as one who wins battles that are already decided long before they're visibly fought. Victories that look, from the outside, almost effortless, because all the difficult work happened earlier, unseen. This is what quiet command actually is. It's not dominance. It's the absence of struggle in a room where you used to struggle constantly. You'll notice it in small ways first. A comment that would have derailed you a year ago barely registers now. Not because you've grown numb, because you've built enough evidence, quietly, that you no longer need a stranger's snap judgment to tell you what's true about your own capability. Their misjudgment simply stops being load-bearing information. You'll also notice something else. Something almost strange. People who once dismissed you start recalibrating without you saying a word. Not because you announced a comeback. Because the accumulated weight of consistent, undisclosed work eventually becomes impossible to misjudge. Underestimation, it turns out, has a shelf life. It survives contact with silence. It does not survive contact with sustained results. This is not a fantasy of humiliating your doubters. That fantasy is still ego, still hungry for an audience, still spending energy on people whose opinion was never actually the point. Quiet command looks different. It looks like genuinely not needing the moment of vindication anymore, because the thing you were actually building, competence, security, a clear sense of your own terrain, was never dependent on anyone else's timeline of recognizing it. The people who reach this point stop narrating their journey in real time. They stop explaining their plans before the plans are finished. They let results, when they arrive, do work that words never could, because a result carries no defensiveness in its tone. It simply exists. And existing is enough. This is command in the truest sense Sun Tzu meant it. Not command over other people, but command over your own reactions, your own timing, your own disclosure. Everything external eventually follows internal command. The room's respect, when it finally arrives as a side effect, never as the goal. Because making it the goal is what breaks the whole strategy at the peak moment, every time. Quiet command also means releasing the people who never recalibrate at all. Some won't. Some will hold on to their first impression of you for reasons that have nothing to do with evidence and everything to do with their own need to have been right about something. Sun Tzu never promised universal victory. He promised something more useful, that the disciplined strategist stops needing universal agreement to feel secure in their own position. There's a specific behavioral shift that marks this stage clearly, and it's worth naming so you recognize it when it starts happening to you. You'll notice you've stopped rehearsing arguments in the shower, the imaginary conversations where you finally say the perfect, devastating rebuttal to someone who dismissed you weeks ago. That rehearsal, common as it is a sign the moment still has a hold on you, still has unspent charge attached to it. When the rehearsal stops on its own, without effort, That's a reliable signal that the underlying need for vindication has actually resolved, rather than just gone quiet temporarily. Quiet command also changes how you handle other people's underestimation of each other, not just of you. You start noticing the same pattern from the outside, a colleague dismissing someone newer, a family member underestimating a sibling the same way they once underestimated you, and instead of needing to correct it loudly on their behalf, you find yourself offering quieter, more useful support, an introduction, a word in the right meeting, information passed along without an announcement attached to it. Sun Tzu's better generals were known for this too, not for grand public gestures, but for positioning their own people advantageously, without fanfare, well before the moment anyone needed to notice. There's an important caveat here, because quiet command can be mistaken for something it isn't: endless tolerance. There is a difference between strategically absorbing a temporary underestimation and remaining indefinitely in an environment that has no intention of ever recalibrating, no matter what evidence accumulates. Some rooms won't update. Some managers have built their entire self-image around being the only capable person present, and no result you produce will be allowed to threaten that story, because their psychological survival depends on the story staying fixed. Recognizing this is also terrain reading, the third law, applied here at the end. Quiet command includes knowing when the correct strategic move isn't patience within the room, but a calm, undramatic exit to a different room entirely, one capable of updating its map when the evidence changes. This is the final shift the whole video has been building toward, from needing the room to change its mind about you, to no longer requiring the room's opinion as the foundation your own sense of capability stands on. That foundation, once it's internal instead of external, cannot be taken from you by a dismissive comment ever again. Go back, for a moment, to the version of you standing in that room at the start of this video, the one who could feel the underestimation settling over the conversation before a single word confirmed it. Nothing about that room has changed. People still misjudge quickly. People still decide, sometimes unfairly, what you're capable of before they've seen the evidence. That will likely never fully stop, in this room or the next one, or the one after that. The strategy in this video was never designed to make people stop underestimating you. It was designed to change what that underestimation costs you and what you're able to quietly build inside of it. What has changed is what happens inside you when it occurs. The old pattern was reflexive: feel dismissed, feel the heat rise, correct it immediately, spend the energy, walk away depleted and somehow still unconvincing. The new pattern is deliberate. Feel dismissed, notice the reflex. Choose whether this moment deserves a response at all, and if it doesn't, let the moment pass, while something quieter keeps being built underneath it. This is not coldness. It's not detachment from people who matter to you. The discipline in this video was never meant for the relationships where you're already respected. It's meant for the rooms, the rivals, the moments where respect hasn't been earned yet on their terms, and doesn't need to be chased on their terms either. There is a specific kind of strength that never announces itself, and it's easy to mistake for weakness if you're only trained to recognize strength when it's loud. But watch closely, over months rather than moments, and the pattern becomes unmistakable. The person who stopped explaining themselves stopped needing to. The person who let the peak moment of dismissal pass without breaking is, 6 months later, standing in a completely different room, one where the old story about them simply doesn't fit the new evidence anymore, and nobody needed to be argued into seeing it. Sun Tzu's entire body of strategic thought rests on a single, quiet premise: the battle is usually decided long before it looks like a battle at all. Every law in this video has been an application of that premise inward, toward the only battlefield that was ever actually yours to control. Not the opinions in the room, not the timeline of other people's recalibration, your own composure, your own preparation, your own restraint at the exact moment restraint is hardest. That is the hidden advantage. Not that people underestimate you. Anyone can be underestimated. The advantage belongs to the person who understands what that underestimation is actually worth and refuses to spend it before it's ready to pay out. There's a version of this integration that's worth being explicit about, because it's easy to romanticize quiet strength into something that sounds effortless once it's finally achieved. It isn't effortless. You will still feel the sting of being dismissed, probably for the rest of your life, in rooms you haven't entered yet with people you haven't met yet. The difference this strategy builds isn't immunity to the sting. It's a shortened distance between feeling it and choosing, deliberately, what to do about it. A gap that used to take years of resentment to close, and now takes a single breath. You'll also find, somewhere along this practice, that the rooms themselves start to matter less than they once did. Not because you stopped caring about respect. Respect is a real and legitimate need, not something to perform indifference toward. But because you've built an internal reference point sturdy enough that any one room's verdict, favorable or not, stops being the entire measure of your worth. A colleague's dismissal becomes information about that colleague's limited view, not a referendum on your capability. A rival's underestimation becomes a tactical opening, not a threat to your identity. This is, in the end, what Sun Tzu meant by knowing yourself before knowing any opponent. Every law in this video, the patience, the conserved energy, the accurate terrain, the formlessness, the discipline at the peak, the quiet command that follows, is really one continuous practice wearing different names depending on which moment of conflict you're in. The practice is always the same. Know your actual position clearly, hold your reactions until they're useful rather than merely satisfying, and let results carry the weight that words were never going to carry as convincingly. You don't need the room to see it yet. You need it to be true. The seeing, historically, tends to follow, later than you'd like, and more completely than you expected. If any part of this found you in the middle of your own room, your own meeting, your own family table, your own quiet moment of being dismissed by someone who never bothered to look closely, know that the discipline in this video isn't a one-time decision. It's a practice, built the same way Sun Tzu's strategists built theirs, slowly, privately, one held reaction at a time. This channel exists for exactly that practice, turning old strategic thinking into something usable in ordinary, modern rooms. If this gave you language for something you've been carrying without words for it, stay close. There's more of this work ahead, and it's better built alongside people doing the same quiet work themselves rather than alone. Because in the end, the strategy was never about winning the argument in that room. It was always about this: when they underestimate you, let them.